Learning Avlak Gemara. Today's daf is daf Yud Gimel. We are up to the two dots at the top of the page. So our mission that we learned before was talking about that you can force two partners can force each other to, or your Yoshim can force each other to divide an estate if there's sufficient, if it's significant enough for each party. But if it's indivisible, then they have to continue sharing it together. Unless obviously they both agree, then there are no limits. You can agree on anything, except you cannot agree on dividing a sefer that has in it a sefer Torah, Nevi'im, or Ksuvim, because it's a bizayon to cut it up. As we will learn in the Gemara later, what we're talking about. Nach or Torah. So we're up to the two dots on the top of the page. You will not divide a palace if there's not if it's after you divide it, either one doesn't have enough to live on to live in that palace unless they both agree. A mouse. What happens if there isn't? It's not big enough, not large enough to divide amongst the two. But the shuttim don't get on, and they can't continue this way. What happens? Now Yehuda introduces a new concept called dina. Interesting. When I was growing up, when the Marashivas is pronounced good or good. I look now in Steinsaltz, it says God agoid, and I looked in the Oizvahad, and there it says good or good. So. Like we mentioned in the past, there are no rules here. Everybody makes up whatever they want. They use the rules of Hebrew for Aramaic, and therefore yes or no. What exactly good? What exactly good means is a machlekes rishonim. The Rabbeinu again says good means to assess. Which means this. You know what? You assess the value of the property and offer it to me, and you buy my share. And if not, I will then assess the property and I will buy your share for you. I can force you, either you buy me out or I buy you out. According to many Rishonim, this only applies to a case of a Yerusha or a Matana where they both didn't have a choice. They were forced into becoming partners. But if we started out in a partnership and now for whatever reason we want to split and it's indivisible, you cannot use the rules of good or yogurt and force me out. You knew that this is the situation, yet you entered voluntarily. Only Matana and Bayrusha. Others disagree. As big machlek is a shenim, and like Rashi just says, any value. In other words, let's say this house is worth $1,000, and you can go ahead and you can say to me, "Look, I'm prepared to pay you $2,000. You can pay $2,000 and take the house from me, or I'll pay $2,000. I'll take the house from you." Now, I know that I'm overcharging. I'm overestimating the value of the house, but this is the only way I'll get the house. So according to Rashi, there's no limit, and the Rambam and others, there's no limit. Taisa brings a rivah that says it's not fair. So every rich person can push out a poor person. So therefore, it has to be the market value, or the bezin has to come in and value the property. The first opinion says, what do you mean it's not fair? When is it not fair? When the guy has a loss. He's getting paid extra. He's getting paid over and above the value. Why is it not fair? He'll buy himself another property for the real value. So that's a machlek, is how far you can go good or good. So the Gemara, so Rabbi Yehuda believes in the concept of good or yogurt. Nachman says, less din is good or yogurt. No such thing as good or yogurt. Doesn't exist. You cannot force somebody out. Nachman said to Nachman, to his teacher, according to you say less din is good or yogurt. That's a question. A pchayid and a pasha. There were two brothers. One was a pchayid who entitled to a double portion, and one was an ordinary brother who did for only entitled to a single portion. That the father gave to them and left behind Yerusha a slave, one slave, a single slave, and a single animal. If it's a kosher animal, just shacht it and you divide it accordingly. The problem is it's a tamadic animal, so the only thing you can do is use it while it's alive. The problem is one is a pchay, one is a pasha. How you divide it? Kate said, I want you to do. So if you believe in good, I say either buy me out or I buy you out. But there's a machlekes in the poskim who says who has the first right. Do I say I'll buy you out? If not that, you buy me out, or the other way around? That you work out a price and you buy me out, or vice versa. But anyway, now how are we going to split it? Now, why are we talking about a b'chor and pashut? Unless it's just a pashut and pashut, same question. How do you split an eved into two? How do you split the behemoth tamei into two? Why dafka a b'chor and a pashut? So there's many answers in the Shayim, but Rabbeinu Tam brings a very interesting answer. Rabbeinu Tam says, if it's a pashut, it's simple. Each one gets 1 day. It's a fair division. 1 day here, 1 day here. But if it's a pchoid and a pashut, One guy gets 2 days, one guy gets 1 day. 2 days is not double 1 day. Because 2 days means you can go, according to the time, you can go to a marketplace that takes a day to travel there, and there the schayr is much cheaper, and you bring it back and you make a fortune. But the other guy, he only has the use of the behemoth's may for 1 day. The donkey will say for 1 day, we'll never be able to get there. So your advantage is not double; you're going to maybe triple, four times as much. It's not a fair, thing. Yeah. And there are other answers, but that's what Ray Tom says. Says the Gemara is just not a fair thing. Malay, so he says to him, so what? So what's not fair? That is what it is. You divide. You have 1 day, you have 2 days, and typical 2 days is worth more than 1 day. So be it. No kasha. Mesa, that's another question we learned. Me shechetzie eved v'chetzia ben chayden. You have a slave that's half free and half still a slave. And how's that possible? He had two owners. One owner set him free, and one owner still maintains that slavery, in the servitude. So what do? So the Bishil says, one day he works for his master, one day he works for himself. The word Bishil. The Shammai says, "Tikantam as Rabbi." Okay, you fixed up how he works with his master. His situation has not been fixed. It's not that one day he has a din of a slave and he's potter for mitzvahs, as and the next day he's a free person. He's chayv no mitzvahs. Doesn't work the way. Every single second he is both chetzi evan and chetzi ben chayden. So the problem is, how can he ever get married? Lisa Shivcha any yochel. He cannot marry a Shivcha. L'chaydi is a half Eved. He can marry a Shivcha, but the half Ben Chayden cannot marry a Shivcha. You Kaddish. He can marry a Shivcha. Okay. Now, yeah. Taisha talks about others. And if he could marry a Shivcha, how would that? You're trying to ensure that he's young to the mitzvah purvu. If he does marry a Shivcha, what do we know about a person who marries a Shivcha? That the children are not named after the father. So the children are not named after the father, he won't be Yaitse Prudavu. So what's the, and if he could marry Shivcha, it makes no difference. So Taishas therefore says, but at least Sheva's colder. The fact is he brought children into the world. And as a result of that, even though he wasn't the kind of Prudavu, and it's not his children, but because he brought them into the world, we're not going to force the master to set them free. Because remember, we'll talk about in a minute, the master is even Aveda for doing that. So we're not going to force the master to set the Eved free. If he's able to bring children into the world, even though he's not Mekayim Prudavu. Interesting cases in the Chagiga, the Beis and the Beis, which is a very long to the Evan, Shagizai, Tor Shagizai, long to the Evan over there that Barichas, which I'm trying to talk about. Taisa there says that not only an Eved has a mitzvah Prudavu, but so too does a Goy. The Prudavu, Bnei Knan, Bnei Noach Nami. Taisha holds it. Everyone else holds that Goy don't have mitzvah. You know, it's an hedge enough to test. We'll talk about that. But Taisha there says that Goy owes him mitzvah. And the Shagizai's problem with Taisha is an Eved has no children. How can it be Yosef mitzvah? We're not talking here about forcing a slave. We're talking about the concept of Puravu. How's it possible? Very interesting. And Mechas Chinuch in the beginning, very interesting. Okay, so let's continue. Lisa Bas Chayden, okay, can't marry, but he's a Ben Chayden. Let him marry a Yiddish girl. Ain't a Yachal. Why not? Because he's half an Eved. The famous takes a question here and gives 4 answers. Why don't we say Esa Doichaloisa? Why don't we say the Asay of Puravu should be Doicha the Loisasa of Loye Kaddish, and that he should therefore be able to, that he should marry a Shivcha, even though you're not allowed to, but Asay Puravu should be able to marry. So the first answer in places is it's not Be'idna. When it's not Be'idna, when are you going to the mitzvah Puravu? When you finish, when you consummate. When are you over the Aveda Mishas Hara? So that you begin. So it's not Be'idna, and we know when I say Dechalit has to be at the same time. So first is the whole discussion Achreinim, Mechas Chinuch, and Chaim Brisker and all that. They talk about the mitzvah Puravu really you're not Mekayim at the Gemar Bia. You're only Mekayim mitzvah Puravu when the child's born. No, boss, since you cannot have a child without having Bia first, so you're counting as if Bia is a mitzvah. No, you can't have Soiv Bia before Tchilas Bia. So therefore it is Bia. In fact, there's a Taisan that Tzalizayin is Wachim, where Taisan gives this rule: if you cannot get to the end without the beginning, it's as if it's Bia from the beginning. And not everyone agrees. So that's why Taisan here is not so happy. He gives another answer. Because maybe it is considered Bia. So he says another answer is, but she doesn't have the mitzvah Puravu. He has a mitzvah Puravu, so his mitzvah pushes away the Loisa. But what's her excuse? A woman has no mitzvah puravu, and she'll be over the east of Layakada. She's a bas living with an eved, or she's a shivcha living with a ben chayr. She has the same aveda, so you can't. Then Teja says, if he doesn't say English, I'm just reading between the lines. According to Yechem Abrek and Yivamas, who says in the Mishnah there that women do have the Mishnah Puravu, so L'chayda, then let's say, at least according to him, even that we don't say, because who said she has to be Makai the mitzvah with this person? She can marry anybody and be Yetzer Mitzvah Puravu. And we learned in Suvah, that there's no Asay is not unless you have no Breda. If you have a Breda, if you have a choice, an alternative, then there's no Esed Loisus anymore. Okay, and the last thing is okay. Anyway, let's get invited. The world was created for the mitzvah period. It says like the whole world was created only for the Shabbos. Taste and all the same. I want to know why, if you're talking about Prudavu, it says in the Torah, Prudavu. Why bring a pasuk in Tanakh that like the because this highlights why this is such a big mitzvah. Prudavu is a mitzvah like any other Tayyag mitzvahs. For a mitzvah, we're not going to force the Bava Basra to set him free. But every eved is potter for mitzvah session man grama. No, so force the Bava Basra to set him free so he can do his mitzvahs. There's no such thing. So why Prudavu? Yeah. So it's not the Prudavu. It's loy l'toyu bro l'shavit soda. That makes it so important. Like we had in the Gemara Megillah that you're allowed to sell a sefer Torah only to marry a woman and limit Torah. And why? Because marrying a woman is such a big mitzvah. Even though I told you the Shiltus, Tyson brings in the Shiltus, which is very difficult to understand. He says that these two mitzvahs, limit Torah and Puravu, are the smallest mitzvahs that we have. You kosh give a all the other mitzvahs you're allowed to sell a sefer Torah for. Difficult to understand, but what he says. Ela Kaifin is Rabbi, you force the master to set him free. Everybody wants to know, but the master is Eivan Aveda. La'olam Bahem Ta'avodu. How can you do that? So one of the answers is interesting. One of the answers is that when is La'olam Ta'avodu if he's 100% a slave? Since one day he's a ben chaydim and one day he's a slave, it's not La'olam. It says Machlekes will have in Zvachim about the word tamid. Tamid means, we actually have enough as well about learning Torah. It says the Gisa b'yom v'layla you be yetzer pereg echad shachar pereg echad avos, and you have to learn the whole time. It's like tonight. The same thing. Tamid. Does tamid mean constantly, or tamid means every day, consistently? Is it constant or consistent? And therefore, la'olam b'hem tavodu has to be consistent. And it's not consistent, there's no loyal tavodu. That's what some say. Others say is because the mitzvah you're allowed to, and sometimes if it's not his fault, you're allowed to do a small mitzvah to save someone else. A big mitzvah where the other person wasn't paisheh, it's not their fault. So what do? What do we recommend? The Eved writes an IOU, and he says to the master, I want to buy myself out, and why a special zakon is a chamim to allow the Eved to go do it through the move. And only he marry shivcha. And he's having children, so you're not going to force the master free. But says, now, the only reason why we said they have a free because it's taken oil because of Puravu. What do you mean? The other can say, good or good. If you're telling me that good or good exists, why can't they say, master, either buy me out or I'll buy myself out? What do you have to have a special kind for? Says the Gemara, Shani Hocha, the Ogodika good leka. He can say, I will buy, he said, I can buy my other half out, but he can't say to the master, buy my, because you're not allowed to sell yourself as an Eved. So therefore, the Ben Chayden part cannot be sold to the master, but then he has to work both ways. So anyway, right to touch back over here, Shnei Achi, two brothers, Echad Oni, Echad Osher. So all the examples of the Gemara is Yerusha. And that's why those are trying to say that the laws of Gudi Ogad are limited only to a case where Yerusha, Matana, you had no choice, you became partners. But not if you bought something together and you knew B'Shas Maisa that this it's indivisible, and now you change your mind, Fafal. You have to convince the person without forcing him. Shnei Achi, two brothers, Echad on one rich, one poor, the father behind the bathhouse of Beis Hapad, and all the press plays. Awesome, if it's not meant to be used by themselves, but rather they rented it out, then that's how they share the rent. But awesome la'atzma, if it was meant for the private use. Now the usher has a lot of use for Beis Hamerchas. He slaves and everything else. The oni, he has no need for Beis Hamerchas, even for himself. The usher, look, what do you want from me? Why do you have kindness to me? You can use it; it's half yours. And the yichutzu b'merchas kachlecha zeisim uboy v'asei Beis Hapad. Go use that Beis Hapad. Bring as many people as you want. Go use the olive press. So another the Greek can say to the poor brother, too bad. Now why can't the poor brother say good oven and force him to buy him out? Then what again? Hasam Nami, they're also good dika. He's a poor man. He can't say, I'll buy you out. So it's only half the equation. The only way it works is that it has to be possible to do good. Then I can say good. Good or good. But if it's only one way that you have to, I cannot force you to buy me out. You can say, I'm managing to buy you out. I'm happy in our arrangement we have. I have nothing to do with the base of marriage. What for me? It's not my fault. Okay, my right to Toshma coming here. This is the rule. Kol she'ilu yachal gishmayel of the Mishnah said anything that you divide, what do you call it? Anything that you divide and the name is still on it. If it's divisible and you still can use it for whatever the original purpose is, you can divide. But then it says if not, you have to add money. Clearly, that's good. It doesn't say in lav too bad. It says in lav, yes, you force each other, but you put a value on it, and maybe we increase a bit, and one person has to buy out the other. So Sarai, there is good yogurt. Anybody right? Abba Tanai, it's a machlekes Tanai. Where do you find a machlekes Tanai? The Tanya, we look at the Braisa. If one brother, let's say the courtyard is 7 amos wide. So one of the guys says to the other guy, look, he says, you know what? I'm happy. I can't live with you anymore. These two brothers can't live with you anymore. You take the 4 amos, you get your full 4 amos, and I'll keep the 3 amos. And let's make a division. What kindness can you possibly have? You got your 4 amos, which is a perfectly the minimum amount that you can have in a chutzah, and I'm Michael, and I'm happy to take 3 amos. Can he force that? So the Gemara Tanakam says yes. He has every right. It's like midas daim in a way. Why not? Rav Shimon says ain't shaymilay. No, you can't force that. And the question is, why not? What possible logic would Rav Shimon had? Hey, Chida, what are we talking about? Take it literally. My time with Rav Shimon Gamliel. What right does the other guy have? Sloicha said he has exactly a 4 amos thing. Why wouldn't he? What right does he have to stop, prevent the other one from saying, I'm Meichel, give me 3 amos? No, boss. Must be, there's a line missing in the Braisa, and that's the line about Gudei Ogud. It's missing a few words. Because the whole din of Gudei Ogud is only when it's indivisible. If it's divisible, you can't force me to buy you out or whatever. Let's divide. I'm happy to have a smaller part. It still works. It's still workable. When do we say Gudei Ogud, buy me out? If it's indivisible, what are you supposed to do? So then we have this rule of Gudei Ogud. So a few words are missing. And remember, we're talking about your courtyard, that's less than 8 amos. You take the share and I'll take less. The good Ogud not be if he gives another choice that I'll buy me out or I'll buy you out, also it's a valid claim. But also Rav Shimon will say Ein Shaymin is referred to Gudei Ogud. Regarding if the 4 amos and 3 amos, of course Shaymin, why not? But the second thing that you introduced, Gudei Ogud, that you cannot force me into that situation. No, La'elam really good. Everyone agrees Gudei Ogud. So what's the svar of Shimon? There's only one machlekes about you keep 4 amos and I'll take 3. So what possible reason Shimon will say the guy has the right to say no? Look at the Tani. I the governor my time Shimon will. I'll tell you what. Should the Amalei, he says to him, look, you're giving me 4 amos, right? Why are you giving me 4 amos? You want me to pay you? You want me to pay extra? Bidami, less dummy. I don't have money. Why should I pay you? I don't have money. No, boss, you'll be Michael and say you can have it. Matana, I'm not happy with it. It says, I wonder how many people observe this particular passage. I don't want to do this. So I don't, yeah, for sure. So I don't. You can't force me to take the 4 amos. Pay, I don't have. Matan free, I don't have anything. So anyway, I have machlekes between the 2 Amoraim, Rav Nachman and Rabbi Yehuda. Whether we say good or Rabbi Yehuda says yes, Rav Nachman says no. Rabbi Yehuda, this Rabbi Yehuda say you do say good, or good. In fact, the Shmuel, his own Rebbe Shmuel, is the one that holds this way. How do I know that? But now we learned it says the Kisvei HaKodesh. The Mishnah said before that Kisvei HaKodesh, Alpha Pichush named Reisim. Even they both agree to split it. Lo yachlek. You don't cut it in half. It's a bezoyin for the sefer to cut the sefer in half. Well, Shmuel said Lo yishanu. When do we say it's a bezoyin ela bekrach echad if it's in one volume? one volume that has Taylor, Nevi'im, whatever Taylor in it, and you want to cut it in Chamoshim. We'll see later about Nevi'im. So it's a bazayin to cut it up. What happens? There are 2 volumes, and I say, if we both agree, you get one sefer, I get the other sefer. We can divide. Now, if he holds less dinner the good or good, if he does not believe in the concept of good or good, why do we talk about krach echad? Afilu b'shnei krachin nami. Even by 2 krachas as well. Right now, the Gemara thinks we're talking about that we didn't agree. We didn't agree, and if we don't agree, we cannot split one volume because we don't agree. And since it's not, we don't get, each one doesn't get enough of it. We only get a half of a Torah. But if there are 2 kriches, Shmuel says, then you get one, I get one. Now, if you believe in good or good, then even if it's 2 kriches, I can I can force the situation, or even one krach, I can force the situation as well. Buy me out or I buy you out. So the mother says, Targum Rav Shalman. Rav Shalman says, Shmuel is talking about a case, not doing good or good. Shmuel, remember the Mishnah says, but when they both agree, we thought that he's talking about a case when they both don't agree. So you cannot divide. And Shmuel says, but if it's 2 krachas, even if we don't agree, you could divide. So l'chayda, we're asking, what do you mean? Even 1 krach, if we don't agree, I can do good or good. Whether you like it or not, buy me out or I buy you out. So because it comes from Shalman, interesting name, and says no, that that it's talking about a case where we both do agree. Even though we agree, one sefer you cannot divide it because it's a bazayin. But 2 svarim you're allowed to buy, even though it might look like a bazayin, you're trading one sefer for another, you're allowed to do that. That's what Shmuel is talking about. Not do with forcing mitzvah good or good and so on. Anyway, right? I'm going to make my miss. That they're going to the halacha if you say good or good, that like Rabbi Yehuda. What about Nachman's opinion? I don't believe it. Sweetly, I didn't hear it, but it means I don't believe it. No, but we found what Rav Barchina, but Abdimi Barchina, Shavik Lu Avu Tarte Amasa. Their father was left behind 2 maids. Choda Yoda Afya Bishula, one who had a bake and cook, one was a really good chef. And the Choda Yoda Pilchuna was a really good housemaid. She knew how to sew and weave and all that. But also the Kabbalah Rabban said, what do we do? How do we split it? We both want, both of them. And he said to them, less dinner the good or good. You cannot force, good or good. You cannot do that. So we see clearly, Rabba Pach, Rav Nachman, no good or good. As the Gemara, shiny Hasam, shiny Hasam, the Lamar Mitboy Le Tavayu. In other words, what happened was one guy said, let's say cooking the chef is worth more than the sewing, than the woman who can sew. Maybe you get so many tailors out there, it's not a problem. But to cook with Shadafsan is very difficult. So he said there's no dinner good or ugly to say, okay, you take the better one and you pay the extra. If not, I'll take the better one, I'll take the extra. So we're still splitting, but one is worth more than the other. So therefore, and therefore, good or ugly, I'll take only one, but I'll pay the extra, you pay the extra. And Robert says he can't. So it doesn't approve, it doesn't look good or ugly. So you want to know. If he would have said, either buy me out, we take both, or I'll take both, that's good or good. But to split in half, you can't. You know why? When can you split? Only if they're both exactly the same, equal. But over here, each one, you need a tailor and you need a chef. You need them both. So how can you force me to take only one? Here it's not a case of good or good when they're different, they're doing different avodas, and I need both. Says the Gemara. Over there, since both of them need both of them, they need both. He says, you take one, okay, the one's more valuable, and I pay, you pay. That's not called goody or good. But if he says, if you take both, that would have been goody or good. So the problem is not because the halacha of goody or good. The problem is that the Metzias is not goody or good. Anyone right? Kisvei kodesh, kisvei kodesh tavayim b'baylu, kisvei kodesh. That they both need both parts of it. That you have 2 krochin, one is Torah and one is Nevi'im, so 2 different krochin, and yet Shmuel says that if it's 2, you can divide. Again, right now we're talking about a case where we don't agree to divide, and I'm forcing you. You take one, I'll take other. Maybe Torah is worth more than Nevi'im, so I pay the extra, you pay the extra, and that's good. And Shmuel says you say it. So we see that we do say good or even when we're dividing, and you take one, I take one, and even because one's more valuable than the other, even though we both need both. So the Gemara, let me just answer. The Shaman said, "B'shirotzu." Nothing to do with guru yoga, nothing to do with forcing, to do with bizoyin. When we agree one sefer, we cannot divide. Two svarim we can. So Tanaban. Now that we introduced the dividing sefer Torah and Nevi'im, we're going to learn in the next few pages about the sefer Torah and all that. Then we digress into other things. I got it. So you what? So we learned mad big adam Torah Nevi'im because we have three opinions here. One opinion says you're allowed to be mad big. You're allowed to attach. You're allowed to have in one scroll a Torah and an Avim, and an Ksuvim, all together. You're allowed to have no problem. Now, the problem might be why what's a chiddush? In fact, we're going to argue because sometimes when you open it up, the Avim is sitting on top of the Torah. You don't have the Avim sitting on top of the Torah. The Torah is the first thing, and you open up, let's say, to Ksuvim. So the Avim is wrapped around the Torah. You know, have the Avim wrapping around, sitting on top of the Torah. Of course, it's one volume. It's not considered. When is it a bezoyin? If it's two separate svarim, you put a novi on top of a chumash, but not if it's all one sefer. That's what I'm saying. Come on, Rabbi Yehuda says Torah b'fnei atzma, Nevi'im b'fnei atzma. No, each one should be on its own. Each one should be on its own. And his svara is not because you're not allowed to sing on top of each other, because Ksuvim and Nevi'im are allowed to sit on top of each other. It's only because a person opens up and sees Bereshis, he thinks, oh, I know Bereshis, it's a Torah. He'll think the rest is all part of the Torah. He'll read Yeshua and Shaitim, will think, and Tehillim will think it's all part of the Torah. So Pasha, because of that mistake, he said, you know what, keep each section separately, apart. So and the Chachamim go a step further. Chachamim say every book in the Nevi'im should be a separate sefer, the same svara. So otherwise, people think it's all part of Yeshua. You're going to read over there about Shlomo Melech, and you think it's all part of Yeshua. You read and the Ksuvim is the same thing. If you put them all in one Ksuvim, you'll think it's all one sefer. Whatever it starts with, you'll think, it's all part of the sefer. So Kamash Shalom, that's what Chacham hold. Each sefer should be, each Navi, each Ksuvim should be separately. So the Gemara, the book, Rabbi Yehuda's arguing Chacham. He said, what are you talking about? I know clearly that there was this person here that had all the Nevi'im bound together, and he said, Al Pi Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah clearly said that you can bind all the Nevi'im together. Not like a mayor that you can bind 2 Nevi'im Ksum together, but like me, that you can bind all the Nevi'im together and all the Ksum together. So the Gemara, and the Chachamim say, that's not what happened. They say, the Chachamim say, Loi hoya loi ela echad echad b'fnei atzma. The Maisi you got is all wrong. It's just amazing. Bring a Maisa proof. No, the Maisa proof is because you get the whole story wrong. It always reminds me of Gemara in Barachas. He says that on Friday night you're allowed to daven early because this Tana davened by this palm tree Friday night early. So the Gemara says, first of all, it wasn't this Tana, it was another Tana. Second of all, it wasn't this palm tree, it was another palm tree. And it wasn't Friday night, it was Motzei Shabbos. And you think, I know it's the same story. Obviously, it's not the same story. You're talking about a different person, different place, and a different night. And yet the Gemara says, never happened because I'm the same thing here. Yeah. Omar Rebbe said, Rebbe says, and Rebbe said he agrees with Meir that you can bind Torah and Nevi'im Ksuvim together, and we will machshir it. Then we continue. Ben chumash lechumash on Torah abba shit. You should have a break. You need a heker. When one chumash ended, another chumash started. You have a break of 4 lines between one chumash and another. V'chein ben kol navi. You need a break of 4 lines. You need a break of 4 lines. Uve shall shneim asad. But when it comes to the small Nevi'im, the 12 Nevi'im, the Chagias and so on and so forth, those 12, they Kimul Shit is enough. 3 lines of space is enough. Umesayim milamata umaschil milamayla. That if you ended up with one Navi on the very bottom of the page, you can start the next Navi very top. You don't need to make 4 lines anymore. And why not? Because since you're allowed to cut between the Nevi'im, it won't look nice if the next Navi starts the 2nd line or the 3rd line from the bottom, from the top of the page. If you start from the top. So by Nevi'im, you can go to the bottom and then you start straight away from the top. But this only applies to Nevi'im. Doesn't apply to the Torah. By the Torah, even if you finish at the end of the line or near the end of the line, you still have to give a break of 4 lines because you don't cut the Torah. You only cut. Actually, the machlek is the shaykh. Some Hashem hold you allowed to cut the Torah also chumash by chumash. Machlek is if a chumash has less kedusha than the entire Torah, and so the Shane say, but this Gemara is talking about you allowed to cut. It's talking about you allowed to go to the bottom. It's talking about Levim. It's talking about right. It's talking about if you want to attach them all together, you can. The beginning. You wrap it around an Amunay's Chaim. So the Oisa Beroisha, you leave a blank in the beginning, a margin, Kedei Logo Amud, enough to wrap around the Eitz Chaim, which is a very small space because you're just starting to wrap. But the Seifa, at the end, Kedei Logo Hekel. At the end, you leave enough of a gap. Remember, you're rolling it around. So the very end, you have to wrap around a much thicker, all the parchment there. So you need more space. Make sure you leave more space. You finish the bottom and you go to the top. And if you can go ahead and cut, you can. If you're going to cut, what's the what's the svara? Why by the vim? If you get to the bottom, the next novi, you start from the very top, because if you cut it, you'll cut it, and it's paslish. But as a question, it says it says the beginning of the sefer, and then you just leave a blank. Enough to wrap. It sounds like the same amount of the same space that you allow for wrapping in the beginning is what you allow at the end. Doesn't make any sense. One of them is a wrap around the normud, and one is a wrap around the whole thing. It can't be the same amount of space. How much space do you leave? Enough to wrap around the Eitz Chaim kashe heket. What about when you come to the end and there's much more? You have to should all be blank. If you leave a much bigger space, a much bigger gap of blank parchment, just enough to wrap around the end when it's all wrapped around the Ahmed. So therefore, the beginning also says bigger wrap around. Kashi Ahmed, why so much empty space? I'm not easy, right? Let's duddy Tony. It doesn't specify how much space, so it depends. It doesn't specify. For the Ahmed, you leave a little bit, and for the Hekif, for the Ben, you leave much more. Now, Rashi says no. It's the same amount. Sefer Torah has two Eitz Chaims. You have two Eitz Chaims, both ends are exactly the same amount. It's when you have only one Amud that obviously the beginning is a very small amount, and the end has a much larger amount. Big machlek is it mitchilasen l'seifen or litchilasen misseifen? In other words, according to Rashi, you start rolling from the beginning and you work your way back there. According to Taisa, you start from the end, and the Eitz Chaim is at the end. You only have one stick, because they still learn from it. You have at the end, and then you work your way towards the beginning. You have a big space. Yeah, the Sabracious are the big heck. The Sefer Torah nigla le'emtzi isa. The Sefer Torah you always roll to the middle because you have two amudim. Va'oisel amud eilich ve'eilich. You have an amud on both sides. That's how they used to actually make this Sefer Torah. They used to have two amudim. So even when they used to learn from it, it looks like they used to have two amudim. So therefore, it's the same gap on both ends. Okay, we'll stop here. Continue tomorrow.